Welcome back. I'm Gila Ross, author of Living Beautifully and host of the Power podcast, where we share short, relatable ideas to impact and upgrade your everyday life. When we started the series, we looked at the question of what makes there's 13 principles of faith. They're called Yud Gimel Ikri Emunah. Ikar is like the fundamental, right? Fundamental beliefs. And we started with the premise that what makes these different than any other sort of Jewish belief is that these have a global ramification, right? If a person believes or doesn't believe in one of these, then it's going to impact their everyday life. For example, one of the beliefs is that belief in reward and punishment, right? Now, someone who believes in the consequences, that there's consequences to our actions, is going to live their day-to-day life very differently than someone who doesn't believe in that, right? Someone who believes it's all meaningless and there's no rhyme or reason to it, they're going to take much less care over what they do than someone who believes in the consequences of our actions. Clear so far? Okay. Does anyone want to read principle number? So you're asking on reward and punishment? No. Very different than karma, I believe. I'm not an expert on karma, and I did a whole class on reward and punishment. One of the things that I'm going to say is that punishment in Judaism is rehabilitative, right? It's not God punishes us because he wants to get back at us for something. It's the idea that if we do something, it has a very real impact on the world, on our life, etc. And part of repairing that might be a punishment, right? Or punishment might come to a person in order to help them, redirect them and help them do better, right? So I think that's different than karma, right? From what my understanding of what karma is, like it's different. But if you want to hear more about it, I can send you the link afterwards to the full class that we did on that. Okay.
All right, back to our
Number 13. Go for it. Yes.
I believe with perfect faith that the dead will be brought back to life when the Creator wills it, and his memory will be elevated forever and ever.
Thank you. When is this talking about? Does anyone know? It's talking about the dead being brought back to life.
After Mashiach comes.
Yes. This is what the prophets talk about when they talk about the dry bones coming back to life. I want to start by saying that it's a radical concept, if you think about it, right? Because we're not talking here about the soul living on after a person passes away. We discussed that earlier on in the series, but that's one of the other fundamental beliefs, that the soul lives on, right? And the soul is eternal. What we're talking about here is that there will be a time period where the body and the soul will come back together again. And if you think about it, it's radical because a lot of other religions, how do they define holiness? How do they define spirituality? It's by dissociating, right? It's by separating yourself from the physical, right? Here, we're talking about the body coming back. And what's the gain of the body coming back? If we're honest, most people don't even like our bodies, right? So a person comes into the world, they're born, I don't know, 8 pounds, and they live for 70, 80, 100 years, however long the average lifespan of a human being is, and the body goes through a thing. We gain a few pounds, we eat a tremendous amount of food to support that gaining of a few pounds, right? We get wrinkles, right? What do we care about the body coming back to life again, right? Why? At best, it's like a nice car. Great, you appreciate it for what it gives you. You appreciate it for the places it takes you. But why do we care about the body coming back?
It's a vessel for the soul.
Okay.
It also begs the question of what about reincarnation?
Yeah.
Which is
So like which bodies? Because we Jews believe in reincarnation. So
Right.
So like then which body is it? Because I'm pretty sure this is not
Reincarnation.
my first life. It's got to be at least my 10th. So do I come back in this body or do I come back in which body is it?
So it's an excellent question.
And at what age?
There we go. You don't even have to go into reincarnation, because if you take I don't know, a 7-year-old's body and a 70-year-old body, like they're completely different bodies, right? Like
Yeah.
on a cellular level, I believe it's every 7 years the cells, right? There's no regenerate, right? There's no sort of, there's very little connection, right? They share DNA or whatever. But so, I mean, I don't know the answers to all those questions. Like which life would it be a reincarnation of, or which life stage?
And how would everybody fit?
Good
Don't
question.
worry, God,
It's a
God
very
makes
good
miracles.
question.
God makes miracles. It's the vessel that the malachim, the angels, cannot perform mitzvot because they have one leg and they don't have a body. But Hashem gave us bodies exactly because Hashem needed us to do action and mitzvot and move and do good in the world. And without the body, that's the house of the soul.
The body was given to us in order to do mitzvahs, right? In order to do good in this world. Let me ask you.
Then after Mashiach comes, there's a perfected experience. So there won't be the need to do the mitzvah because everything will be perfected already.
So I want to share with you an analogy that sort of answers that question. The question is, what's the point of the body coming back if it's done its job? Is that so? There will be limited free choice, right? It won't be free choice like we have it just because it's not so clear what the right thing is. Part of what we spoke about last week is that idea that when Messiah comes, the world will be filled with the knowledge of God, right? And if everyone knows about God and if everyone knows what God wants from us, it's much easier to do the right thing. So there will be much more limited free choice. But back to your point, the analogy that's given is that, like, why? What's this resurrection for? I mean, and then we're going to move into the question of why is it important to believe it, right? There's an analogy given of the king had an orchard and he noticed that someone was stealing his fruit. So he had two workers, one who was lame and one who was blind. And he was suspicious that the two of them had done it. So he called them both in, and the lame person says, "What do you mean? Like, how can I steal anything? Like, I can barely walk, right?" And then he calls the blind person in, and the blind person is like, "What do you mean? How could I steal any of your fruit? I could barely see, right? I can't see." So the king's smart, and he realizes what's been going on is that the lame and the blind person have together paired up to steal fruit from him. So what does he say? Is he brings them both in together. He puts the lame person on the blind person's shoulders and says, "This is how you did it. This is how you're going to get punished." The idea here is similar, right? That our body and our soul, like, who does a mitzvah? Is it our body or is it our soul? Both, right? The body's the vehicle, the soul is hopefully the driver of it, but the soul can't do any mitzvahs on its own, and the body can't really do any mitzvahs without a soul driving it to do it. In the world to come, when after Mashiach comes, Hashem will bring the body and the soul back together because they both deserve reward, and they'll both enjoy the reward together. Does that sort of make sense? So let's back up a little bit. What's the goal of our physical life?
It's a good question.
Well, to do Hashem's will, right?
Okay.
To fulfill our purpose.
What's the point? What is the point of all of this, right? Anyone wants to take a shot at answering a nice simple question on a very, very briefly, right? God created the world and created us in order to give us rewards, right? In order that we should get the maximum reward. And briefly again, we all prefer things that we earn, right? Everyone likes a freebie, but no one wants to live off a handout the whole life, right? We want to feel independent. We want to feel like we are like sort of the creators of our own life, right? The creators of our destiny. And therefore, God put us into this world in order to earn our own reward. How do we do that? Is basically, we can think of ourselves as sort of like a recycling machine for the world, right? We take physical things and through a prescribed process, we turn it into something that's eternal, right? Something that's spiritual, something that's eternal, right? And this is why the Torah compares human beings to trees. The analogy is that a tree, what does a tree do? Is its roots are in the ground. It draws nourishment from the ground and it sends that nourishment up, grows branches and fruits from it, right? We, as human beings, have a physical body, we live in a physical world, and we take those things and we transform them into spirituality. Does anyone have an idea of how we can do that? Give me an example of how you can take something physical.
When I ate an apple today and I said the prayer first.
Beautiful, beautiful. You're taking something that is very physical, right? An apple. And by infusing it with spirituality, that apple now becomes eternal. Right? So that's what the idea is that we in our lives, we don't lose the things, we don't just necessarily use them, but we sort of transform them into something spiritual and something eternal. And if you think about it, so much of Judaism is so physical. Think about Shabbat, for example, right? You come in from the synagogue on the Friday night and you take a glass of wine, physical thing, very physical thing, and you sanctify Shabbat over it. You sit down and have a beautiful meal, food, materialistic food, right? Lots of it, delicious challah. We spend time with our family and loved ones, right? All very, very, very physical things. And when we take those physical things, we're transforming them into eternity, right? That Shabbat meal, right? Those foods that you ate are not just wasted, they're now energy that is transformed into eternity. It's a radical concept, because the idea here is, and if you can sometimes compare it to other religions, where the idea of holiness is like going off on a mountaintop or separating yourself from the physical world. This is the opposite, really. It's taking the physical world and it's elevating it. And interestingly enough, there's a Jewish law called a Nazir, right? A Nazir is someone who took on for a certain temporary amount of time, let's say 30 days or something like that, to not drink wine or eat grapes or cut their hair, right? Like they're abstaining from these things for a certain amount of time. When they finish their time, the law is in that they had to bring a sin offering, right? This was in the time when we had a temple. Why? Why a sin offering? Not that they broke their promise. They kept their promise. They made a promise that I'm going to abstain from grapes, from wine for let's say 30 days. At the end of the 30 days, they have to bring a sin offering. A sin offering. Any ideas why they would have to bring a sin offering? Because that's not the ideal. Sometimes we have to abstain, right? Sometimes there is something, for whatever reason, we're working on ourselves and we have to abstain from something physical. But that's not the ideal. The ideal is we engage in this world and we elevate it through our actions. There's nothing wrong with what the Nazir did. In fact, it's considered a holy, praiseworthy thing to do, and yet there's an element of here that we have to know that's not the ideal. That's not the ideal. The first mitzvah that we're given, right, in the Torah, is to be fruitful and multiply. Now, what does that demand of a person, to be fruitful and multiply? It means you have to be married, you have to engage in trying to have children, you have to have a job, you have to have, right? Like all these things which demand of us that we have to be involved in this world. That's the ideal. The ideal is we're engaged in the physical world and we elevate it through these prescribed ways. How do we know what elevates the physical world? From the Torah. Beautiful. How do I know that making a blessing on an apple elevates it, right? How do I know, for example, that lending money to someone else elevates that money?
From the mitzvah.
The Torah gives us all these guidelines of this is how you elevate the physical world. This is how you take the physical and you elevate it into spirituality, into eternity. We said that this is a fundamental principle, this idea that the body will come back again. Why do you think that is a fundamental principle? What happens when a person sort of lives with this knowledge that the physical, we're here to elevate the physical world?
What happens when someone lives with that knowledge?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it depends on what their moral compass is, right? So that knowledge could be there and someone could say, I don't care, I've had a terrible life. What's the point of doing anything? And someone else could say, well, I'm here to do something good. And I want my memory to be a blessing, basically. Like I want to be remembered as someone that did mitzvot.
Yeah, and I would imagine that someone who understands that the physical has value, right? Because we can take the physical and we can elevate the physical. And there's so many ways that we can do this. We can do this for Shabbat. We can do this with our interactions with other people as well. When we are kind to other people, when we're respectful of other people, when we interact in a way that honors other people, right? We're taking the physical, our physical interactions with other people, and we're elevating them. When someone does that, then they realize that everything has the potential to be elevated into spirituality, right? The money we have, money can be elevated into the spiritual when we use our money mindfully, when we use it to do good in this world, right? Again, it doesn't mean that you have to live a life of abstention. You can enjoy it as well. But again, this understanding that I'm going to give a certain amount to charity, I'm going to use my money for good things, then you're taking something that's very physical and that trips a lot of people up, and you're using it to elevate, to become more spiritual through it. And that money through that becomes elevated. I have a friend who had a child a few years ago who was unfortunately had a lung disease. He unfortunately just passed away a couple of weeks ago. He was 4 years old. I mean, and it was incredible to see and to still see, right, what these parents did with a challenge like that, right? How the faith that they had, how they channeled so many prayers, so many people around the world who prayed for this little boy, who did good deeds for this little boy. And I'm not going to go into like, this is why things happen, because that's not my place to say. I just want to point out something that we can see how even a little boy who has very serious physical disabilities can be such a conduit for good, right? By all that, the way that he's affecting other people, right? And it shows us that there's so much opportunity that we have in our life to elevate the physical lives that we live.
Well, even with like the things that people have done in the name of the hostages to try to bring some good, that's an example too of a terrible situation, the worst that we've ever experienced in our lives, and trying to do, good things.
It brings us full circle with the first principle, that God is the driving force of everything. God is the driving force of our lives as well. And what that really shows us, if God is the driving force of our life, then really everything that happens is happening for a reason, right? And this one is showing us as well that everything in our world and in our lives has a destiny, and what we become partners with God in creating the world. What do I mean by that? Is because God creates the world and he puts us in it, and then we choose to elevate that physical world, and we become co-creators with God. Interestingly, the word for in Hebrew for a commandment is a mitzvah, which comes from the word of tzav, sadivav, which means a connection. And the concept there is that it's showing us is that when we do a mitzvah, we connect to God. We become partners with God. Why? Because God has this vision of what God would like the world to be, right? God has this vision that Shabbat is going to be this beautiful day of connection and family and spirituality. Or God has this vision of how we're going to treat each other, or what we're going to eat, or how we're going to interact with the world. And when we choose to do those mitzvahs, we partner with God in carrying that out in this world, right? We become the ones that create the reality of Shabbat, right? Or create the reality of how we treat each other, create the reality of what we eat. This, together with the first commandment, is really showing us is that God is the driving force of everything and the physical world, and we become partners with God when we take those opportunities that God gives us and elevate it to the spiritual. I have a problem though that I wanted to share with you. There is a prayer in the morning that we say called Elokai Neshama, right? It's thanking God for giving us our soul back in the morning. The problem with the words of the prayer is it says it like this: Elokai Neshama Shenosato Bi. God, the soul that you have given me. Who is this me?
My body.
Seems like I'm my body and I have a soul. Here's the thing: when we're born, we're not a soul. We're given a soul, but we're not a soul yet. Our job is to acquire it, to make it our own. I'll give you an analogy. Someone who goes to space, they go in a spaceship. What's the function of a spaceship?
To travel to space.
Yes, and it serves two functions.
Protect the body from I work in aerospace, people.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
To protect the human body against all the dangers that are rampant in space.
Yes, and then there's a second function as well. So number one is to protect from the environment it's going into, but the nourishment for the person, right? The food. If the spaceship didn't have it, then it wouldn't have the sustenance and the nourishment. Right. It's the same thing, right? We have positive mitzvahs, which is like the nourishment for our souls, and we have the negative mitzvah, that the sins that God says don't do them. Why? Because they're going to be dangerous for your soul and for your soul, right? Now, we as human beings, we have a conflict. We always have a conflict, right? Do I connect more with my body, or do I connect more with my soul, right? Am I a citizen of heaven and spirituality, or am I a citizen of this world and physicality? And we can't be both at the same time. We have to constantly choose which one we're gonna connect to. Right? Am I going to connect to the spirituality or am I going to connect to the physicality? I'll give you an example, right? I'm sure tonight you all had a choice. You could have come to this class, or you could have stayed home and watched a show on Netflix or wherever. Hopefully, the class provides nourishment for your soul. Yet, the other choice is usually easier. It's much easier to stay home and do nothing, read a book or watch something. That doesn't mean there's not a time and place for all of that. But the idea really here is that I'm trying to highlight is that we always have a choice. Who am I going to choose to identify with right now? And we don't necessarily think of it that way. We don't necessarily think of it, oh, am I choosing to identify more with my soul right now? Or am I choosing to identify with my body right now? Is it easy, these choices?
The thing is, I'm confused because you said you can't be both, but we said before that things are both. So when I'm eating the apple, I'm still enjoying the apple, and I'm eating it because I'm hungry, and I'm saying the prayer. So I think it's both at the same time.
Okay, so you're raising a very good point. When you're choosing to eat the apple, there's nothing in spirituality that says don't enjoy the world. We're supposed to enjoy the world. God made the world for us to enjoy. He gave it to us with love. He gave us this apple with love. If you think about it, Rabbi Victor Miller talks about this. He was a rabbi that lived a little bit ago. He talks about like the beauties of an apple. It's this, beautiful thing that most of us don't think about, that is crunchy and sweet and delicious and ready-made, and you don't have to do anything to it, right? You just, and it's full of nutrients, right? It's a gift. It's a total gift for us. The moment we tap into that spirituality, that higher purpose, that physical thing becomes elevated, right? So it doesn't mean that we can't enjoy the physical world. It just means that we are conscious of being here for a higher purpose. You can go on the most, physically beautiful hike somewhere, and it can be a spiritual experience. Why? Because if you take a moment, and sometimes that's all it is, it's a moment of awareness to be like, wow, this is the world that God created. And there you go. Boom, you've elevated that physical hike. Right? So it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy the world, but where is your focus?
It's a perspective shift.
Yeah, and it's about elevating it, right? And sometimes it's harder than that, right? Someone does something that's really annoying to you and you want to lash out and you have to rein yourself in and not lash out. It'd be very hard. Sometimes it's just a moment of awareness that, wow, this is the world that God has created, or a moment to be like, you know what, I'm going to eat this apple so that I'm well nourished. And then you take that and it becomes elevated. Sometimes it's hard. How do we win this? So Adam was given two paths, right? He was told by God, don't eat from this tree. He didn't listen, right? Instead, he chose the immediate path of gratification. For generations and generations, they grappled with this until what happened was Abraham was tested 10 times, and through him passing the test, he sort of implanted within us that we become sort of naturalized citizens of spirituality, right? We have this potential to be spiritual beings. That's what he implanted within our sort of spiritual DNA. We begin life as a body with a soul. And every single time we cater to our soul's needs, it becomes more integrated into ourselves. Sometimes it's a simple moment of mindfulness, and sometimes it's a struggle. And it's going to be our ongoing life things. But I just want to share something. If you find it hard, it's usually a good sign, right? Because someone who ignores the voice of the soul, they can become numb to the soul's desires, right? But if you have that grappling and that conflict between, like, do I do the spiritual thing? Do I do the right thing? Or do I just do what's easy and comfortable in the moment? That shows that you're spiritually on, right? You're working through this. And our job is to use it wisely, right? To use our soul and our body wisely, and to recognize that every time we use it wisely, we're taking this thing and we're converting it into eternity. We take the apple, we're converting it into eternity. That's going to be a merit that we have for eternity. And then when we recognize this concept, it opens up to us this idea that everything, really everything in life, is an opportunity for us to transform it into spirituality.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear your feedback, and if you enjoyed this episode, you'll love my book, Living Beautifully: How to Bring Meaning, Joy, and Love into Your Life, based on the timeless wisdom of Pirkei Avot. And please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. Have a wonderful day.